What started as protests on our street has descended into intimidation, threats, and planned acts of violence. Jewish children fearful to wear their school uniform lest it reveal their identity. Muslim women abused in the street for the actions of a terrorist group they have no connection with. Now our democracy itself is a target. Council meetings and local events have been stormed. MPs do not feel safe in their homes. Long-standing parliamentary conventions have been upended because of safety concerns. And it is beyond alarming that last night the Rochdale by-election returned a candidate who dismisses the horror of what happened on October the 7th, who glorifies Hezbollah and is endorsed by Nick Griffin, the racist former leader of the BNP. I need to speak to you all this evening because this situation has gone on long enough and demands a response not just from government, but from all of us.
These were not the remarks of a liberal left pundit or an establishment media hack, but a state address by former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak outside 10 Downing Street on March 1st, 2024. Sunak had cancelled all scheduled engagements and boarded a private jet back to London specifically to address the nation. This came not following a general election, a political coup, or another pressing national concern, but in the wake of a by-election. The ostensible leading figure of the British establishment was forced to address Britain. The winner of the Rochdale by-election was none other than George Galloway, a veteran socialist agitator and leader of the Workers' Party of Britain. Just as outstanding as the victory of the Workers' Party being denounced before the nation, the very same evening, Galloway defenestrated Sky News reporter Sam Coates.
Don't keep telling me about the Prime Minister as if he was Moses.
Do you not respect the Prime Minister?
Do I respect the Prime Minister? I despise the Prime Minister.
Following this, the Workers' Party, in spite of an establishment media blackout, was propelled to become the most successful socialist and anti-imperialist party in British electoral history by number of votes won. Galloway's opening words of his victory speech at the Rochdale by-election.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza.
Successfully took the anti-imperialist struggle from the back foot to an offensive position, recruiting thousands, boosting morale, and carrying them into an electoral contest with the class enemy. And many have either forgotten or ignored that this was not a struggle that was limited to the ballot box. Workers' Party members were attacked on the streets of Britain numerous times, in one case being run over, in other encounters they were set upon with bladed weaponry. Sunak's rallying cry heralded the beginning of a new era in British politics that only the Workers' Party managed to contend with uncowed. Communists cannot but consider that the Workers' Party not returning an MP in the general election, especially a class warrior like Galloway, as anything but regrettable. But in the period following Sunak's speech, it is anything but surprising. The Labour Party's tenure of government has shown that British finance capital has moved firmly into an epoch of suffocating corporate dominance. Many weaker organisations will dismiss this as fascism. But how can it be in the absence of any serious organised working class forces to crush? In reality, imperialist corporate monopoly has seized its prize even at the expense of those other exploitative classes, be they the British industrial bourgeoisie or the petty bourgeoisie. Having firmly gripped Britain with both hands, the internationalised imperialist bourgeoisie need not concede but only rake in more profit, accumulate capital into fewer hands, and heap more power upon itself. In this context, Sunak's speech marked the Workers' Party as an unacceptable inconvenience to their plans. And in this context, What have communists in Britain done? They are best judged in contemporary circumstances by their relationship to the Workers' Party aforementioned achievements, i.e., their communist work amongst the masses, and in this particular case, their work with respect to an advanced and organized section of the working class. As far as we're concerned, only two organizations are of note: the Communist Party of Britain and the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. Both deserve some extended analysis of their words and deeds. We believe that their actions prove that neither are redeemable in their current state. In this case, why not join the Workers' Party, you may ask? We would not hesitate to suggest that you should. Should communists be amongst advanced workers? Absolutely. The Workers' Party and any other organization of advanced workers, i.e., of socialists and anti-imperialists, should be engaged with wholeheartedly. But the Workers' Party, by its own admission, is not a communist party, stating openly that the Workers' Party is not a communist party and had no intention of becoming yet another party of this type. By this, we believe what they mean is the Workers' Party had no intention of becoming yet another party of their type. Understood this way, and based on the words and deeds of other communist organizations in Britain, who can blame them? That said, while the Workers' Party acknowledges its important work as a mass organization first and foremost, and while the two parties laying claim to the mantle of Britain's Marxist-Leninist party are in such a pitiful and moribund state, the question, of course, does arise: do we need a new one? The CPB has long been reduced to an impotent auxiliary of social democracy. It shepherds those advanced workers who could break out of the confines of imperialist reformism and towards Marxism-Leninism, back to supporting the Labour Party under a revisionist direction. In the words of their leader, Robert Griffiths, at the last election, despite Starmer's backsliding, U-turns and betrayals, millions of working-class people will be voting for the only alternative party of central government come the general election. Are we with those millions or against them? This is taylism of the lowest kind, lagging behind the movement in the broadest, basest sense. The possibility of improving the CPB is close to none, while the clique of Griffiths, Murray, and their ilk have a firm bureaucratic hold over the organisation, even stifling the progress, with some odd flourishes to be sure, of the supposedly autonomous YCL. The CPGB-ML, by contrast, despite their contributions on the propaganda front, tail the advanced sections of the working class in practice. They tail those they denounce as tailists, as they lead nothing themselves, and so, like the Ouroboros, they consume themselves endlessly. And standing apart from the class, they are unable to contend with the actualities of the class, and so they are incapable of engaging the class. They have rendered themselves ultra-leftists in theory, their strategic truisms failing to find relevance among those dealing with very bleak concrete conditions unfolding before their eyes, and that could be met with proper agitation. Their continued existence relies entirely on the individual worker falling into their orbit by chance, and this, whether they like it or not, is bowing to a form of spontaneity. The CPGB-ML, in their purge of those involved in the Workers' Party, have likewise shown an incapacity to progress beyond their current state and adapt to conditions as necessary. Their work is a worse poison than the CPB, and the fact that much of their analysis and propaganda is only sound in a vacuum until it meets the requirements of cold, hard practice is a dangerous mix. The best lies contain truths, do they not? Communists for too long have been reduced to the worst hypocrites. They profess against sectarianism, yet are the most sectarian. They lecture unity, yet in practice impose uniformity. And they espouse discipline, yet rarely does a meeting start on time. If we are frank with ourselves, Marxism-Leninism has become the possession of the dilettante, the fantasist, and the freak. Too long has communism been relegated to book worship. Too long has practice been defiled by the ritual of paper selling. Too long have gurus suffocated advance into the masses with agitation in hand. Since the 1970s, the practice of these sects have stagnated into a withered caricature. The analysis and propaganda of the CPGB-ML journals would have been perfectly at home and in fact useful in that period, because at that time the movement was large and vibrant with advanced class-conscious workers aplenty in both political and economic struggle. But as Lenin stated in What Is to Be Done, the character of any organization is naturally and inevitably determined by the content of its activity. It is unsurprising then that as the CPGB-ML confines itself to such narrow political work, that its organizational work is correspondingly narrow. It's not enough to be correct in analysis, as we cannot analyze away our enemies. Matter without motion is abstract, is it not? But the character of the CPGB-ML is that of stifling pedantry of an editorial board of a newspaper, not a party fighting for the dictatorship of the proletariat. Today, the world has changed in both conditions of work, political class consciousness, and just as importantly, in communications technology. Theory should inform practice, and that practice should not be the mere regurgitation of theory, whether by spoken word or written letter. In turn, practice should inform theory. If any of these sects ask themselves how many recruits physical copies of papers and journals have recruited in 20 years. Is this the best use of our time? This leads us to the chief issue at hand. The existing sects have rendered themselves incapable of orienting themselves to the needs of the proletariat and the actualities of British conditions. Whilst the CPB hopelessly tail and seek the approval of the official movement and the Labour Party, CPGB-ML genuinely believe that they are the general staff of the revolution in waiting. At their 10th Congress, they passed a resolution to build the Party of Scientific Socialism, which concluded the following practical demands. This Congress therefore resolves that every candidate and full member of the party must 1. Be familiar with the party's education program and work through its contents in both personal and group study. Learn to analyze the world and current events as a Marxist-Leninist and seek to be able to explain them in writing, speech, or any other medium they are capable in. Remain a humble student of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin. In short, study, analyze, regurgitate, and study again. This is woefully lacking. Another resolution entitled Communist Work in the Trade Unions, a somewhat better, or at least more practically minded resolution we might add, concludes with the following paragraph. This Congress reaffirms the communist view that successful experience in using its organized power to wrest concessions from the ruling class is a vital step towards building proletarian confidence in itself as a class. Our role is to assist in bringing the working class to the realization that it is indeed the ruling class in waiting, that its problems are ultimately unsolvable while capitalist production relations persist, and that ultimately it must progress from the struggle to improve conditions for the sale of its labor power to the struggle to abolish the wages system itself. On the face of it, this, at a glance, is a perfectly fine truism, but it in fact exposes the chief weakness of the CPGB-ML and other like-minded communists, blighted by ultra-leftism. Reread the first sentence carefully, then the second. The CPGB-ML do not consider the former their role, only the latter. The relationship the CPGB-ML have settled on with not just advanced workers, but all workers, is to point out the strategic aim of communists, i.e. proletarian revolution, the dictatorship of the proletariat, etc. Anything less than this is not revolutionary. Of course, it is a role of communists to set the strategy and point to the historical tasks ahead, but to make the exclamation of your strategy your primary tactic is foolish, more reminiscent of the many Trotskyist sects calling for revolution now. The reality is that in order to pave advance to the latter strategic aim, communists must dedicate to agitating the path towards it. Why do we state this? Isn't this a reduction? The CPGB-ML and the many others who are cut from the same cloth do love to lecture on the conclusions of what is to be done, but conveniently miss key points made by Lenin that led to the conditions of writing that historic work. One such tract in particular is the 1890s and the work undertaken at that time. Hence, we had both the spontaneous awakening of the working masses, their awakening to conscious life and conscious struggle, and a revolutionary youth armed with social democratic theory and straining towards the workers. In this connection, it is particularly important to state the oft-forgotten and comparatively little-known fact that although the early social democrats of that period zealously carried on economic agitation, guided in this activity by the truly useful indications contained in the pamphlet on agitation, then, still in manuscript, they did not regard this as their sole task. On the contrary, from the very beginning, they set for Russian social democracy as the most far-reaching historical tasks in general, and the task of overthrowing the autocracy in particular. In this, we see the implementation of two lines of work. One is economic agitation, and the other is setting forth the far-reaching historical tasks, i.e., our strategy. The CPGB-ML no doubt gloss over the work on agitation because of who wrote it, later renegades of Martov and Kremer. Like Plekhanov or Kautsky, those who drive progress can later turn renegade and vice versa. This does not mean their works of progress should be discarded. This work is of vital importance because it identifies the actual activity of communists in 1890s Russia. The economic agitation identified by Lenin is explained in these terms on agitation. Therefore, however broadly based the workers' movement may be, its success will not be secured until such time as the working class stands firmly on the ground of political struggle. The achievement of political power is the principal task of the struggling proletariat. But the working class can only be confronted with this task when the economic struggle demonstrates to it the clear impossibility of achieving an improvement in its lot in the current political circumstances. It is only when the aspirations of the proletariat collide head-on with current political forms, only when the torrent of the workers' movement meets political force, that the movement of transition in the class struggle to the phase of consciously political struggle occurs. As Social Democrats, we set ourselves the task of leading the proletariat to an awareness of the need for political freedom as the preliminary condition for the possibility of its broad development. Here we read a concise explanation of the strategy, the current consciousness of workers, and the level of struggle and the path that they must be led on in order to advance. Subsequent explanation of how such agitation was conducted in practice is a demeaning task for the acolytes of the CPGB-ML. Thus, the task of the Social Democrats is to conduct constant agitation among the factory workers on the basis of existing petty needs and demands. The struggle aroused by such agitation will train the workers to defend their own interests, increase their courage, give them confidence in their strength, a consciousness of the need for unity, and ultimately, it will place before them the more important questions which demand solutions. Having been prepared in this way for the more serious struggle, the working class proceeds to the resolution of these vital questions, and agitation on the basis of these questions must have as its aim the formation of class self-consciousness. The class struggle in this more conscious form establishes the basis for political agitation, the aim of which will be to alter existing political conditions in favor of the working class. The subsequent program of the Social Democrats is self-evident. So the communists of this period recognized a preparatory period of agitation in the lead up to political agitation being appropriate, i.e. of raising class consciousness. This Lenin noted as economic, not economist agitation.
Of course, it is here we must note British conditions are somewhat different. But the point cannot and should not be missed that mass agitation must be used to lay the foundation of a path towards conscious and higher forms of struggle.
In Anarchism or Socialism, Stalin explained this in the following general terms. But there is movement and movement. There was movement in social life during the December days when the proletariat, straightening its back, stormed arms depots and launched an attack upon reaction. But the movement of preceding years, when the proletariat, under the conditions of peaceful development, limited itself to individual strikes and the formation of small trade unions, must also be called social movement. Clearly, movement assumes different forms.
So, the dialectical method says that movement has two forms, the evolutionary and the revolutionary form.
Movement is revolutionary when the same elements combine, become imbued with a single idea, and sweep down upon the enemy camp with the object of uprooting the old order and of introducing qualitative changes in life, of establishing a new order. Evolution prepares for revolution and creates the ground for it. Revolution consummates the process of evolution and facilitates its further activity. Laying the foundations of future and more advanced class struggle on the basis of existing petty needs and demands or minor quantitative changes is demonstrably beneath the CPGB-ML. But you cannot make bread without the laborious task of kneading the dough. That the Workers' Party were and are essentially doing this dirty essential work for them, and that this is met by the CPGB-ML like an abusive parent scorns an unwanted child is all the more disgraceful. This foul behavior has always afflicted the communist struggle. As Kim Il-sung noted on the correct implementation of our policy towards intellectuals, one of these shortcomings is that they tend to become swollen-headed because they have a little knowledge. Some comrades look down on others as ignoramuses, considering themselves to be erudite and people of great importance. They regard themselves as the wisest of the wise, insist that they alone have the correct opinions on any problem, reject the opinions of others out of hand, while stubbornly persisting in their own and refuse to listen to others. They are even less willing to accept criticism. This is why the masses do not want to have anything to do with such people. It is incumbent upon us, then, to struggle relentlessly against such narrow-minded intellectuals and dilettantes who disparage such vital work, and in contrast, set the work before us on a firmer basis. We must understand the following is not only desired, but essential to contend with the actualities of British conditions: propaganda and agitation, strategy and tactics, theory and practice. These form the basis on which a new party is required, and the struggle ahead will forge the communists who will lead it.